I have a presentation, but I'm going to read through this presentation for the most part because we're running out of time, and I'm going to try and stick to 20 minutes. But I tend to speed up as I talk, so if you can just sort of tell me to slow down whenever necessary, that would be great. Okay, so the title of my paper is Reflection on Marxist Feminist Organising in South Africa. And it is really a reflection on my and Jackie's side on this initiative, the Feminist Table, which started 2 years ago in 2012 in what is seen as the post-Marikana moment, but I'm not going to spend much time talking about that moment. I want to talk about the Feminist Table. So I'm going to start off by reading out the words in some words in Afrikaans, which I'll then translate into English. The words, ons is die vroue, ons is gevaarlik, which means we are women, we are dangerous, we are a threat, we are subversive, are sung with hands clapping out the beat and feet stomping in dance. This song, like many others sung over the 2 days of an annual Feminist Table workshop, signals the start of a session. Even though Afrikaans is not a language spoken by all participants, and we can talk about the politics and the appropriation of this particular language. So even though this language is not spoken by all the participants, the meaning is clear and the intention to build collective feminist power is articulated. Song and dance bring together women from mining, farming, displaced, and ecologically ravaged communities to confront the crisis of social reproduction experienced by all, but which has especially dire implications for poor communities. But the Feminist Table is not only about song and dance. The broad aim of the Feminist Table is to promote, and here I have to rethink the word, grassroots empowerment by promoting solidarity among community-based activist women, deepening our collective understanding and challenging hegemonic knowledge. This challenge includes critiques of the existing social order and visions of alternatives. At the same time, the meetings promote a sense of celebration of women's strength and resilience. In this paper, we argue that organizing in the South requires a socialist feminist methodology which embodies this initiative we'd like to think the Feminist Table. This initiative was started 4 years ago in 2012, and earlier in this year we had our 5th annual meeting. We called it the Feminist Table to capture 4 key ideas. The first one is the idea of eating on or around a table. In South Africa, like other places in the world, women have the responsibility for organizing household consumption, for putting food on the table, and this is becoming increasingly difficult for many working class women as people lose their jobs and food prices rise. Food sovereignty is an important cross-cutting theme of all the meetings as it relates gendered responsibilities and expectations with economic and environmental concerns. The second idea is the idea of peace. Peace negotiations after armed conflict often take place around a table, and this is a space of power from which women are generally excluded. The third idea is the idea of social exchanges, which are open, transparent, and honest, captured in the English expression, put your cards on the table. The Feminist Table provides a safe space for women to discuss often harrowing conditions in their communities. Some conversations reflect on sexist, cultural, and religious influences on women's experiences. Collectively, the room takes on these influences and subtly amends it, pushing women to rethink and reformulate the experiences in ways which strengthen our struggles as well as our identification with socialist feminism. Fourthly, and we feel most importantly, it implies the idea of bringing women together. Bell Hooks has stressed the importance of connecting different women, but particularly academic and grassroots women. She wrote, "The separation of grassroots ways of sharing feminist thinking across kitchen tables from the spheres where much of that thinking is generated, the academy, undermines the feminist movement. The feminist table acknowledges unequal power relations between women, specifically between academic feminists and feminist activists. The table attempts to equalize such relations by placing academic thought on the same level as that of women activists' understanding of their position and struggle in their communities. But many women in South Africa do not have formally laid out kitchens or even tables. Yet they carry the responsibility of social reproduction. This form of work is carried out under conditions of massive unemployment, a lack of public and household infrastructure, and in communities severely impacted by ecologically destructive capital. So the more specific aims of the feminist table is to make social reproduction a central political issue. Doing so involves drawing from an anti-capitalist Marxist feminism. So there are a number of principles of a Marxist feminism which we draw from the works of Jacklyn, for example, predominantly Silvia Frederici. We also look at the work of Banerjee. And I am hesitant to rehearse those particular points here because I think it's been covered by the conference thus far. We can come back to this if necessary. But I'd like to talk about how we maintain that the reworking of Marxist feminism formulated in the global north is necessary to address the legacy of apartheid and colonialism in South Africa. So what we're arguing is that a reworking is required, which takes into consideration the experience of women in post-apartheid South Africa. And we'd like to suggest that key features of this legacy are that while there has been an increase in the representation of women in political office, and some people yesterday also referred to to a number of quite progressive laws which emerged in the post-apartheid era, such as law on abortion and same-sex unions. Most black working class women in South Africa continue to live in poverty and experience multiple and interlocked forms of discrimination along class, race, and gender lines. The privatized nuclear family is not the predominant experience in Southern Africa, and I'm going to speed up now. And but what we need to consider, and this is a separate point, that while cultural reductionism is not the intent of the feminist table, we have to recognize that patriarchy and gender inequality has deep cultural roots. For this reason, we feel that the gender division of labor, which ascribes women to unpaid domestic labor, is often unquestioned. In South Africa, and I don't think anywhere else in the world, there is a common conception of women as a universal social category. On the contrary, the widespread exploitation of black women as domestic workers, for example, or as volunteer care workers, illustrates the dominance of class. We also suggest that in post-apartheid South Africa, gains made by the middle class are matched by the growing impoverishment of the working class. So how does the feminist table, in this particular context, look at the experiences of black working class women? And we'd like to suggest that what we do with the feminist table is to concretize social reproduction by taking a view of two sites of unpaid work in South Africa, the household and the environment. And as I said previously, food sovereignty is quite a strong theme because it cuts across these sites. By the way, we don't like the term food insecurity, but we can talk about that a little bit later. So South Africa is facing a food crisis, a massive food crisis, which is characterized by the fact that approximately 53% of the population experience hunger, either regularly or intermittently. This situation, it is estimated, is due to worsen due to the current drought that we experience of more than a year in the food-producing areas of South Africa, the sharp devaluation of our currency, and the displacement of subsistence and medium-scale farming by extractive mining or large-scale agriculture. So what we're trying to do is, by looking at social reproduction in the household and the unpaid work of women around the environment, is to bring together a number of social crises and look at it in this perspective. So the crisis of social reproduction and how it affects the household relates, we have argued in a previous work, relates to the high HIV/AIDS infection rate, disrupted family relations and care, and the insecurity of work. We also discuss in the paper how environmental racism continues even up until today. So I don't know how much time have I got left. So, but I'll just talk briefly then about how we put these ideas into practice and in terms of building solidarity through the feminist table. What you have on the overheads is just a brief summary of my discussion, and I'm just going to read through how we build solidarity in the feminist table in quite and much more of a narrative style. So since its first meeting, the feminist table has highlighted the central insight of Marxist feminism, that production and reproduction of labor power is essential to capitalism. This unpaid work is done by women. Reflection and discussion of women's actual experiences has illustrated how unpaid care work, for example, acts as a subsidy for capital's profit-making. Nancy Fraser argues that wage labor could not exist in the absence of housework, child raising, schooling, affective care, and a host of other activities which help to produce new generations of workers and replenish existing ones, as well as through maintaining social bonds and shared understanding. Social reproduction is an indispensable background condition for the possibility of capitalist production, end quote. So, drawing sessions at the feminist table allows women, firstly, to express how care is being conducted in the household, predominantly by women and girls. Secondly, discussing their drawings collectively reinforces the understanding that this division of labor, which allocates this work to women, is the key to women's subordination. To illustrate, at a recent feminist table workshop, one of the women spoke about walking on her knees with a bowl of water and a cloth to help the men wash their hands before a meal. Other women in the room respond by pointing out that only women are expected to do this, that these activities rest on assumptions that men are breadwinners, even though women are also engaged in livelihoods, and that the respect and dignity embedded in these activities are the reserve of men, while women are meant to take pride in serving them. Discussions about and illustrations of women's lived experiences are further elaborated on in subsequent sessions when activists and academics make the links between household activities and the broader economy and society. In these interactive sessions, dialogues are held where questions such as who bears the cost of social reproduction and who benefits from this work are posed and answered in group settings or collectively. Listening, sharing, and encouraging those who are more tentative to speak of their experience are dealt with in various ways. The most important being to have simultaneous translation or interpreting for those who are not well-versed or confident in speaking English. The participants themselves are eager to overcome the obstacles of a multilingual environment. South Africa, by the way, has 11 official languages. As expressed by one farm worker participant who said to the entire group, "I don't care what language we speak. I came here to listen to what your heart says." In these ways, solidarity and empathy are strengthened. Gradually, workshops evolve into sessions where representatives from the different community-based organizations talk about the initiatives they have taken in their communities to socialize domestic and ecological labor. One group of women farmers, for example, described how they took over a government-initiated food bank when they realized that incompetence within government structures prevented the food from being distributed and led to wastage of rotten produce. They then established their own food bank with their crops and ensured timeous and fair distribution of vegetables. These are intense learning sessions when organizations learn from each other and also academics learn from grassroots activists. There are always moments, however, of celebrating successful campaigns or simply the strength of women. Thus, the sessions are interspersed with singing and dancing. While the primary focus of the workshop is to deepen everyone's understanding of the relationship between production and reproduction from the bottom up, that is, from grassroots to the bigger structures of society, key inputs are made by experts, so-called experts. Experts are drawn from academics, NGOs, but also grassroots organizations to hone in on alternatives to the current capitalist system. This entails, for example, a presentation on community childcare facilities in places like India or Mexico, or seed banking, which is then, these initiatives are then intensively debated. Seed banking, for example, is something which happens, which has happened for centuries in Africa and which is now being appropriated by bigger companies. But that's, yeah. So these initiatives are then, or these instances, phenomena are then intensely debated and with respect to the South African context. After intense 2.5 days of workshops, the discussions and solidarity of the feminist table are spread further amongst more than just the 60 women who attend the feminist table. One organization has initiated its own regional workshops, which replicate this particular model. Another collective adopted the theme of care work as its 2016 program, and thereby drew into their network conversations about care with religious groupings, some academics at other universities, very importantly the student movement, and organizations who work on issues of reproductive health with young women and children. So, in conclusion then, the unpaid work of working class women, the unpaid work working class women do outside the market in two specific spaces, the household and the environment, contains, we suggest, a transformative potential. Collective non-marketized arrangements such as cooperative food gardens, sewing, bulk buying, seed saving, shared childcare, people's restaurants, all point to an alternative society. The realization that has emerged is that the shared recognition that what are experienced as individual problems are social issues with social causes and social solutions that require women's collective action. But this was not always framed in terms of feminism. When we started 4 years ago, few of these women would describe themselves as feminists, as they saw the label of, they saw feminism as elitist and concerned with individual advancement rather than collective empowerment. It is still not embraced purely as a label or simply as a set of political actions, but as the notion of feminism coheres around the forms of solidarity practice by these women and how this represents a certain way of life. Our challenge is to build a transformative feminism that is grounded in the material realities of the global South, and that is part of an anti-capitalist struggle to end all forms of oppression and exploitation. Thank you very much.